Hi and welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to be completing the LABCOAT pattern we drafted out earlier. Now if you missed that episode, there will be a link in the description box, so kindly click on it and it will take you to the first video. We're going to be cutting and stitching in this tutorial. Now please, if you've not done so, to like, subscribe and comment, please kindly do so, as you are going to be finding this video very helpful. We are going to start this tutorial by first cutting out the pockets. Now remember, we didn't add any seam allowance to the pattern we drafted, but on the fabric we are going to be adding seam allowance. For the length, we'll add 3 more inches to the 8 inches to make it 11, and for the width we'll add 2 more inches to the 7 inches to make it 9. Go ahead and mark these measurements both for the length and width on your material. Now I'm making use of this white chalk because it doesn't stain fabric. So if you are going to be sewing for a client, you don't want to have those colored marks on your clothes except you want to launder it. Proceed to cutting out the fabric. Please note that you are going to be cutting 2 of this pocket fabric, and when I was done, I placed it on this cloth that will help me with the ironing, and I've marked out 2 inches from the length part, and I'm folding it at this point so that I'll be able to hem that edge. I'm just pressing it well to have a nice crease. So after the first ironing, I folded in again in half and I'm ironing. Now it's time to create that beautiful pocket shape. So you start by placing the pattern on the fabric in such a way that it is centralized. That means there is room at the sides. Remember, we added 1 inch seam allowance on both sides for the width. Once you've placed the paper that way, with the top parts aligning well with that folded part, you're just going to take it one step at a time, fold and iron following that shape. You can sprinkle water at this point so that it will stay better in shape until you are able to sew it on the fabric. I've done same for the other pockets, and you're going to be using the same method to prepare the smaller pockets. I did that off camera, but you're going to be seeing it while I will be sewing on the fabric. Now that we are done with the cutting of the pockets, we'll be moving over to cutting out the front and the back. Now I'll be starting with the front pattern. The shoulder length of the front is usually shorter than the back because the back has to overlap the front, so we'll be subtracting 1 inch from the front. You definitely can subtract more than the 1 inch, but make sure that whatever amount you are going to be subtracting from the front, you'll be adding it to the back so that it will balance up. I went ahead to fold in that 1 inch I marked, but you can also cut it away using your scissors if you drafted 2 patterns, like 2 separate patterns for the back and the front. To cut out the fabric required, first you need to determine your length and width. For the length, I want my LABCOAT 43 inches long. Remember, we subtracted 1 inch from the shoulder, so 43 inches minus 1 will give you 42. And then we need hemming allowance, will be 2 inches, so 42 inches plus 2 inches will give you 44 inches. Then you need half an inch at the top join the front and the back, that will give you 44.5 inches. And then for the width, remember that our greatest horizontal measurements while drafting was 1/4 of our hips plus 1 inch, that gave us 13 inches. To this measurement, we are going to be adding the width of the wrap, which is 4 inches, then half an inch for the button stand and 2 inches for seam allowance. Now let's go over it once again. The 1/4 measurement I had from my pattern was 13 inches, so I'm going to be adding 4 inches for wrap, which is 17 inches, half an inch for the button stand, making it 17.5 inches, and finally 2 inches for seam allowance, making it 19.5 inches. I'm going to be cutting out the fabric for the front and the back using the length and width I've just calculated. Go ahead and mark these measurements on the fabric. Make sure you are cutting 2 for the left and right parts of the front. The next step after cutting was ironing. While ironing, I marked out the 4 inches part, which is the wrap, and ironed it on fold, as you are going to be seeing soon. Now this is what the left and right parts of the front looks like after ironing the wrap. I'm placing them in opposite direction. Do not place them in the same direction so that you don't end up having either two left or two right. After arranging the front and back parts of your lab coat, go ahead to mark 1/2 inch as I'm marking at this point. This is for my button stand. Like I said earlier, try and use white chalk for this project and you'll thank me later. I know you may not see well on the screen, but that's best because it's not going to stain on the fabric. Now that you are done marking that on the fabric, use your ruler to make it into a straight line and then place the pattern on the fabric in such a way that the straight edge matches the 1/2 inch mark you marked already. Now the 1/2 inch mark is for your button stand. You can as well pin your fabric in place so it will not shift while cutting. When you are done aligning, cut it out and remember to add seam allowance at the shoulder, the armhole and the sides because we didn't add it to the pattern paper. At the neck, I added 1/2 inch seam allowance, armhole area 1/2 inch, and at the side was the 2 inches I left. Proceed to cutting out the neck part by placing the pattern and transferring that measurement to the fabric. Remember, we placed the pattern 1/2 inch away from the edge, so cut it out and set aside. For the back part of our lab coat, we are going to be determining the length and width of fabric we need as we did for the front. Remember, the length of our lab coat is 43 inches. To the 43 inches, we are going to be adding 1 inch since we subtracted 1 inch from the front. So 43 inches plus 1 inch will be 44 inches. Plus 2 inches at the bottom for folding allowance to make it 46 inches. And finally 1/2 inch at the shoulders to join the two shoulders together, making us have 46.5 inches. In total. We are done with the length. I'm moving over to the width. Remember, our highest circumference was the hips and we divided it by 4 inches to have 12 inches. We are going to be adding 1 inch for back vents. That will make it 13 inches and 2 inches at the sides, bringing us to 15 inches. Mark this measurement out on your fabric, unfold and cut it out. I'm done with cutting mine out and at this point I'm folding it over to iron. For the back vent, mark 1 inch at the top and about 2 inches at the hip level. Then use your ruler to connect it. From the lower part of your lab coat, come up by about 10 inches and that's where your stitching is going to stop. So stitch on the diagonal line you just created when it's time for stitching. I'm placing the pattern we created to cut out the back. I should have made another pattern, but this was a client's order. I didn't have a lot of time to work with. Right now I'm unfolding the pattern at the shoulder. That was the 1 inch mark I folded while cutting out the front. And from the top edge, I'm measuring down 1.5 inch. 1 inch is the extra length for the back to overlap and 1/2 inch is just to join the shoulders together. If you are a beginner, please make sure to pin down before cutting out. After I was done ruling out the line, I used that as a guide to cut out the shoulder and armhole parts for the back. So sorry, I forgot to mention, leave 1 inch from the edge while placing the pattern on the fabric. Once I was done with that, I went ahead to cut out the neckline. We need to also cut out the fabric required for the sleeves. So to determine the amount of fabric required, just add extra 2.5 inches to your sleeve measurements. 2 inches is for the folding allowance at the bottom, while 1/2 inch is just to join it together with the armhole. Know that you are going to be cutting out this pattern on fold, so make sure your pattern is on fold as you are seeing me mark at this point before cutting out. I'm ironing at this point just to make things straight and neat. On the length part, I'm just opening up the fold and marking the 2 inches, which is my folding allowance, and ironing to have a crease. I folded it again into 2 lengthwise and I've added 2 inches allowance at the side, and with the help of my pattern I'm just going to align it and cut out. My back is going to have a band, just like you can see on the screen. So I'm just measuring 5 inches by my hip measurements plus 2 inches for seam allowance, and I'll be displaying the measurements I use on the screen. We will be folding it this way and sewing it. To place our pocket on the fabric, that's by measuring from the tip of the shoulder 19.5 inches, that's 19.5 inches. This is where the mouth of my pocket will be. I'm going ahead to mark out the length of my pocket, which is about 8 inches from that point. From the side, I'm measuring 3 inches just to make sure everything is in place. I'm placing the pocket on the outline I made, and please use pins to secure it in position before sewing. But before you go ahead and sew, remember the mouth we folded in while ironing in the first video. Go ahead and stitch it before you stitch the pocket finally on the fabric. As for the lower part of the front, I'll be folding it, so I'm measuring now 2 inches from that bottom and joining it into a straight line. Once I'm done with that, I'll fold it in an iron. I'm doing this for both the right and left parts of the front. You can go ahead to fold in the back as well, but I did mine off camera. When you are done folding, we are going to be proceeding to stitching. Start by stitching the 1 inch diagonal parts we marked at the back earlier. Top stitch on that part you sewed to keep the stitch in place. And when you are done, you join the shoulders of both the front and the back together and stitch. After stitching the shoulders, I'm going ahead to draft out my collar. To do this, I'm going to be folding the neck area, as you can see, into 2, and with the aid of my tape, I'm going to measure. Now this is going to give me half of my neck measurements. I'm going to grab my brown paper and quickly draft my collar. Now this is the paper I'll be using, and I'm drafting it in half. From that edge, I'm going to be placing that half of my neck measurements minus 1 inch and mark. I'm making it into a straight line at this point. Then I want my collar about 3 inches in depth. That's why I'm drawing that straight line. From the points you are going to see me measure, place the back neck measurements. At the side of the collar, extend it by 1 inch and connect that line to that point. I'm making it 2 inches from the top, and I'm joining to that back neck point with a slight curve. This is what I have after cutting out from the fabric. So I'll be using this as a template to cut out the collar. As you can see, I started by folding my fabric first, then I'll be pinning this down and cutting out with my scissors with about ½ inch seam allowance for stitching. I'm cutting yet another one to make it 2 collars, and when I'm done, I'm unpinning and placing it this way. That's how I'm going to be sewing it round. After sewing, go ahead and notch the edges so that it will lay flat when you iron. As you can see, I'm done stitching my pockets in position. I'm aligning the armhole points together. You can see that the back overlaps the front by the 1 inch, so I've notched, and I'm going ahead to place the sleeves. If you notice at the bottom, I've already folded in the sleeves, so I'll be pinning it down in position and sewing. Of course, we are going to be doing this for the 2 sides. I've top stitched my collar, and I'm just making sure everything is accurate and in place before notching the center. Align the center you just marked with the center of the LABCOAT block and pin it together. You'll notice that it is 1 inch shorter than the normal neckline. When sewing, fold over the wrap to the other side and stitch. I'm so sorry I didn't capture that while sewing. And from the armhole point of the back, come down by 10 inches, and that's where you are going to be placing the band. Once you are done with that, sew it through and you have your LABCOAT. I apologize once again, this was a rush tutorial, that's why I couldn't capture everything, but don't forget to fold in the edge and make the wrap at the back so it will look more presentable. The last clip is where I attach my buttons to the LABCOAT. I used a spacing of 3 inches.